Okay, so if you could just tell me your name and tell me all about your like work at Queen's and how it's kind of tied into in the international student body.
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Kate Black.
Yeah.
My official title is Registration and Fees Administrator.
Okay.
I've worked in this capacity for about 5 years. Prior to that, I was at Student Wellness and then at undergraduate admissions. So in all those roles, I come into contact with international students.
Awesome.
Particularly in this role,
Yeah.
the international students we meet are from the beginning when they step foot onto main campus.
Yeah.
It's all about making that transition very smooth.
Okay.
Providing them access to services.
Okay. Is it just undergraduate or as well as postgraduate ones that you see?
All students.
Everything.
So at the registrar's office, it's grad students, distant students, all Queen students, so the entire student body. Yeah.
Okay. In your opinion, what are like the key motivations for prospective international students to want to actually study abroad rather than in their domestic country?
Right. So the reputation of having an international education,
Yeah.
Being able to study in English,
Right.
and better prospects. So they tend to look towards the future down the road.
So kind of like staying within the country that they are studying
Yes,
in?
or moving back
Right.
eventually, but with credentials that are recognized internationally. So sometimes their home universities don't have as much recognition on the world stage, or they're coming from areas that are impoverished and the opportunities just...
Yeah, I guess Queen's is highly ranked, so...
It's pretty highly ranked, yeah. And especially so if you separate the undergraduate from the graduate students, the funding packages for research-based grad studies is quite high, even for international and domestic. So that would be an incentive for like a graduate student. We get lots of families at the graduate level, so it would be the man or the woman with their significant others that would come.
Right. Okay. Do you feel that students who have studied abroad, like internationally, gain a competitive advantage when they're applying for jobs?
A huge advantage.
Yeah?
Massive advantage.
Okay.
Yeah, because employers are looking for diversity, they're looking for ways to be more inclusive. Those are the two big ones at Queen's.
Okay.
And so someone who has a background that is diverse, that involves studying abroad, definitely would give you an advantage.
Do you feel that students that study internationally get more value in their actual education?
Absolutely, I do. Even at the grassroots level, the type of people that you're going to meet, the variety of people, you're going to meet people from all over the world that are going through some of the same things transition-wise, like whether it's, language, cultural values, living food, all those kinds of things.
Everything,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You've obviously worked at Queen's for quite a while. In your opinion, what makes like a university appealing or unappealing to prospective students?
Reputation, cost,
yeah,
funding opportunities, location in terms of they would be less likely to go to something that was rural as opposed to
straight in the city,
metropolitan area. So universities the size of like Queen's, Guelph, Windsor, that are within Canada and close to big urban areas, but are still have their own small microcosm, are particularly attractive. I know for Queen's, because we're close to the States as well, a lot of exchange in international students.
Too.
Like, they just jet across the border to
30 minutes
visit. Exactly.
When students are like looking to select the university, what kind of key informations do you think the university has to convey to them to be more attractive?
That's a really good question.
Like kind of in terms of like the marketing material, what would be a couple of the main kind of key points that the university wants to sell?
Absolutely.
I guess the USPs.
Yeah. So global reputation.
Yeah.
Access to services.
Right.
And that would be a broad range of services. That the place that they're moving to has variety.
Right.
That it's not just going to be, that they're not going to be isolated.
Right.
So that goes to having orientation events for international, that are geared specifically for international students. Is it,
Yeah.
Frosh Week doesn't really work with international students because they have their own sort of separate that runs in tandem to
Is it similar to Frosh Week, or what is it?
It is, but taking into consideration that some of the students are coming from very kind of eclectic different areas.
Yeah, of course.
It's much more narrow in scope.
Right.
Giving the students a chance to climatize to the university surroundings, but also the city of Kingston, because they're going to be accessing more so than domestic students services within Kingston.
Yeah. That kind of just leads to my next question. What are your views and experiences, either talking to people or witnessing international students in relation to culture shock, like coming from diverse backgrounds and ending up in Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. So communication through sort of clear language, having different languages available.
Does Queen's have that?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
So the Smith School of Business does. They have English, French, Mandarin, Portuguese available, I believe.
Okay.
The Queen's International Center does, certainly, and they have translators as well.
Okay.
And they run English classes, conversational English classes.
Yeah.
And the registrar's office, no. So, I mean, it's kind of piecemeal right now. Sir, what was the original question? I totally lost my
Just kind of speaking about your experiences witnessing student culture shock.
Oh, right. So the other thing would be at Queen's we use acronyms. So it's the JDUC, it's SOAR, it's
the
QUIC,
ARC.
it's ARC. Yeah. So we kind of try to move away from that, to kind of realize that not everybody is going to understand what we're talking about, because we get so immersed in what's going on at Queen's that you forget that
it's got its own little culture almost.
And that applies to domestic students too. I mean, somebody coming in, you could just speak whole sentences and acronyms, and
of course,
they have no idea too.
Have you ever kind of witnessed or seen any experiences of international student loneliness?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. That I see more at an undergraduate level.
Okay.
So at the graduate level, when either they come with their spouse, significant other, or family, there tend to be more...
Yeah, they have their own little bubble almost.
...ties, right? Whereas if you've got international undergraduate students who decide to stay in residence, the residence assignment is random, and they could be on a floor and going through different orientation.
Yeah, of course.
Which automatically sets them up for loneliness or isolation. And typically we see some of those international students, the withdrawal rate in November.
Really?
So a couple months
in, are there any other issues that you've seen international students face other than culture shock and kind of loneliness, isolation?
Yeah, I mean, so the potential to be scammed at tax time. So we had couple of international students.
By that, do you mean those kind of phone calls of...
where they say,
hello, this is the Canada Revenue Agency.
Yeah, that's right. And they threaten them with deportation. And because they don't have experience knowing that,
That's
immigration
awful.
is not going to show up at your door.
Yeah.
We've had some circumstances where international students have been preyed upon and just have been too afraid because they're coming from...
Yeah, of course. Totally understandable.
It's just...
and they don't know if that's like a thing that happens often or not, because they're not used to the country.
And then they're too embarrassed to kind of follow up. The other thing would be sometimes culturally, like if there's an international student who's struggling,
Yeah.
they are less likely to kind of reach out. There is a cross-cultural counselor,
Yeah.
and there are supports through the International Center.
Okay.
But for international students, taking that first step is
Yeah.
much more difficult and, you know, has greater stigma
Yeah.
attached. They just
Yeah. Out of all these kind of issues we just spoke about, what do you believe is the biggest pain point or like demotivating factor for a student actually coming abroad if they're worrying about these things?
It would be financial input versus the reward at the end.
Right,
if
so
I'm
cost
coming in
versus
as-
value almost.
Yeah, if I'm coming in as an international engineering student, I'm going to graduate probably and do fairly well because I'm directed.
Yeah, of course.
If I come to commerce, I'm going to be directed as an international student. As an international student coming to do humanities or arts, unless it's fine arts or music,
Yeah.
it can be a little more difficult because if you graduate with, you know, political science, unless you're wanting to go through academia entirely, the job prospects are
Limited,
yeah. But they're moving more towards helping students with the career path earlier on in their undergraduate to both international.
That's actually
like
pretty cool,
job
actually.
prospect,
Yeah, prospecting quite early.
Yeah.
What does Queen's University do to kind of like prevent these issues of like loneliness, culture shock, and the scams from arising? Do they have preventative measures?
Well, certainly. So I know the Queen's International Center, they run tax workshops specifically for international students, but it's open to everybody.
Okay.
So the International Center is for all students, but it's catered, a lot of the programs are catered specifically for students coming from abroad.
Okay.
But everybody's welcome because you want interaction.
Inclusiveness.
Domestic inclusiveness for sure.
Mixing everyone together is good.
Yeah.
What sort of marketing materials have you seen Queen's University offer to these international students?
Right.
Both like prospective ones as well as ones that have already arrived.
Yeah. So there's a dedicated international recruitment team, and Chris can probably speak to it.
Right.
Who they have geographical areas. So Queen's opened an office in China, in Beijing.
Oh wow.
So there is like bricks and mortar.
Yeah, of course.
And in Europe as well. But then the recruitment teams travel to different, either post-secondary or high school.
Yeah.
And they recruit based on, so it's numbers is what they use.
Right. Okay.
I've got some way to figure that
Calculate it
out. But Smith School of Business, on the other hand, I mean, they have offices sort of globally and based in Toronto too.
Okay.
They have satellite offices, and they do a lot of sort of online recruiting.
Really?
And yeah, so they're at a whole another level.
Yeah. Out of all like the marketing material you provide students, which do you believe kind of students respond to best?
Students now respond best to being sent things electronically.
Okay, so online interaction.
Online interaction, Skype, live chat.
Okay.
Those kind of meetings, those kind of like even academic advising, or I have an interest, can I live chat it to
Right.
you?
So would you say that the marketing material has to have a personal interaction to them rather than...
I think, so again, for graduate and undergraduate, graduate, not so much.
Right.
For undergraduate, because parents are still quite heavily involved, I don't think parents have moved towards the online or grasp the online just quite yet in terms of marketing. They're still fairly tactile. They would rather have a view book, and some universities still send all their material like the actual physical copy. Queen's is moving away from that because they found that doing the face-to-face recruitment and then following up
with an online...
With online, yeah.
Okay, so you'd say that it's moving towards a more electronic kind of guidebook.
That's the way it's moving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's everything that I had to ask you, and I really, once again, appreciate
your
time
taking
taking
problem, Sebastian. I find that really interesting.